What is up, you guys? Pete DiCarlo here, and today I want to bring a stock to your attention. The company is called Endeavor Group, and the ticker is EDR. Now, this is a company that I've been waiting to go public for a very long time. Like we're going to speak about once we go through this article. They have offered to go public multiple times, withdrew the offer, brought on more debt, then went finally public a couple of days ago. But the company is called Endeavor Group. They are parent company to WME IMG. We'll talk about that. They are the parent group to the UFC, which is obviously everybody at this point probably knows what the UFC is. And they actually bought the UFC not too long ago for $4.2 billion, allowing Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta, the original owners of the UFC, to walk away from the deal with a massive profit, leaving Ari Emanuel, who is the CEO of Endeavor Group, as well as Dana White, who is still the current president, to kind of run the company. And since then, they've been doing a really good job. Now, it's funny because if you look at an old interview, I'll actually go to YouTube, and if you just look up Joe Rogan and Dan Pena, which Dan Pena is the GOAT, if you guys don't know who he is, they originally talk about how the UFC can make their money back, and one of the biggest things was for them to actually take the company public. This is something that Dan Pena talked about a long time ago, and this is what a lot of companies do, because when you can bring a company public, it helps all across the board. Yes, you do lose a good portion of your private shares. Yes, you do have to deal with SEC regulations. Yes, you do have to deal with shareholders and giving away equity in the company. But overall, it allows you to trade the company for a much higher multiple to recoup the money that you got back. Because you have to realize when William Morris bought this company, the UFC more specifically, which I'm going to focus a lot more on. We will talk about WME, IMG, and the other assets that the company has in a prior deep dive video, or in a deep dive video coming in the future. This is kind of just a quick video to keep you guys updated with what's going on and to keep an eye on the company. I will do a full deep dive. But when they purchased the UFC back in, I think it was 2017, 2018, the company's worth $4.2 billion. You had Conor McGregor, one of the biggest cash cows for the company, fighting very, very actively. It was at the prime of his kind of reign within the UFC. He just defeated Eddie Alvarez for the second title. You had Ronda Rousey, who was still an integral part of the UFC, massive cash cow for the company, and the company was on the rise. Now, the Rona and the pandemic really, really helped the company, and still they're still facilitating and putting on live sporting events with capacity crowds. The only person to ever do that. I mean, the only company to do that yet. But they are doing a lot of groundbreaking things, and I want to talk a lot more about that in this actual video that I'll be putting out later. But this is a video to just bring this to your attention. I took a position in Endeavor not too long ago, down here around $24, $23. I sold a couple of days ago up here around 28 or 27. I took a very good profit. I wanted to hold this company long term, but I wanted to wait for a pullback. Of course, that didn't happen. So as a long-term fundamental investor, just hold on to positions. But overall, if Endeavor can get back down to 26, I do plan to take another position. And I do really like this company. From a fundamental standpoint, from a financial standpoint, it's not the best. But I want to go over this pretty good article. I'll put it below from Market Watch, talking about the 5 things that you should watch about the IPO. This was written right before IPO. The stock has gone public since then. We already talked about that. But these are some things to watch. And this, going over this article together, will give you an understanding of what WME does, what the IMG aspect of it does, what the UFC has to do with this. And I want to read it together so this way I can elaborate on some things that you might not know about. So let's get started. Endeavor Group Holdings, the Los Angeles-based entertainment powerhouse and the owner of William Morris Agency, which is the WME, IMG, that's all part of that, and the modeling agency IMG, as well as Mixed Martial Arts UFC, priced into its initial public offering late Wednesday. So the 3 main pillars of this is the modeling aspect, which is the IMG, the modeling agency, William Morris Entertainment Agency, which they are one of the biggest agencies out there. They have, I think it's like Jennifer Aniston. They have, let's look up. So we'll do it together. I looked up a couple days, but William Morris clients. So they have Jennifer Aniston, Ben Affleck, like the who's who. Yeah, Ben Affleck, Jennifer Aniston, Jessica Alba, Christian Bale, Kate Beckinsale, Matt Damon, Jennifer Gardner, Whoopi Goldberg, Jake Gyllenhaal. Like every gigantic actor that you think of is probably represented by William Morris Endeavors. WME is a massive agency, and if you guys have ever watched the show Entourage, If you guys know who Ari Gold is, he's one of my favorite characters in any type of show that I've ever watched. Ari Gold, this dude, played by Jeremy Piven, that is who this guy is based off of. This is called Ari Emanuel. He's the CEO of the company. Ari Gold and his agency is based around WME and Ari Emanuel, which goes to show you like how important and how integral that WME is to Hollywood and to actors, and they're one of the best that are out there. So there's three main pillars: IMG, which is the modeling; WME, which is William Morris; and then there's UFC, which is the latest massive acquisition that the company had. The company sold 21.3 million shares, priced at $24, at top of its proposed price range from 23 to 24, raising about $511 million at a valuation of over $6 billion. So the company is valued at $6 billion, and they bought the UFC for $4.2 billion. So that means that they're really saying the rest of the assets of the company are worth about $2 billion. A previous effort to complete the IPO was canceled October 2019. We talked about them pulling back following a pushback from investors who were put off by its complicated finances at a time when other deals were flopping. The timing is unusual for this second bid too, given that the company has taken quite a hit during the pandemic, which halted live TV events, film production, and the business endeavor relies upon making money. So if you guys remember, if you're massive UFC fans, which we're going to talk a lot more about this in the actual deep dive video, the entire entertainment agency took a massive hit. So think about it. There's nobody really modeling as soon as the pandemic hit. There's nobody making movies during the beginning of the pandemic. And so what did the UFC did? The UFC, which I love Dana White. He might not pay his fighters correctly, but I love Dana White, and Ari Emanuel, who owns the company now, is like, we have to put on fights. That's the only cash that we can generate is from the UFC. You know, William Morris and IMG, they're not going to put any money out right now. We have to do this. And so if you remember, the world shut down in March, and April 1st they were trying to put on a fight. And the only reason they weren't able to put on a fight was because ESPN, who they have a massive deal with, we're going to talk about that more in depth when we get into the big breakdown video, but ESPN wouldn't allow them to do that. And I think it was the senator of California. I think it was California. It was California or Vegas. I think it was California, where they were supposed to do the fight with no fans, actually called Disney and was like, do not let this happen. And so they didn't happen. But then towards the end of April, they were able to start putting on fights, and they've been putting on fights ever since. And like I said, the most recent card, Usman versus Masvidal, sold out, did like, I think 700,000 pay-per-view buys. So the UFC is doing really, really well. And when you look at the ESPN deal that they have done over the past year, essentially the ESPN deal, they have to put on 52 or 53 fight cards per year. That's why there was like 3 fights per week going on after the reopening sort of last year in 2020 during the pandemic, because they had to meet the contract for ESPN. So they were putting 3 fights a week out. It's pretty crazy. But basically with that deal, and we're going to go more deep in the next video structuring the way that that's done, they basically break even as a company just from the ESPN deal, and all the pay-per-views, all the profits from fight nights, everything of that's all just profit. And so overall, like I said, they originally planned to IPO in 2019, pulled back, and then during the pandemic, they took a massive hit. But to me, it's a short-term massive hit from the UFC standpoint, but long-term, that is a massive quantum growth that the UFC is going to see once the world gets back to normal, because they just continued to put out an amazing product during the pandemic. So the timing is unusual. We talked about that. So while we believe the long-term value of premium intellectual property, content, and experiences is enduring, in the near-term impact to our business as a result of Rona has been significant. Endeavor EDR is now betting heavily on the UFC's future and intends to use the proceeds to deal a $1.7 billion private placement with private equity firms to acquire a 49.9% stake in the UFC that doesn't already own. The stake was snapped by Silver Lake Partners, KKR, when Endeavor purchased 50.1% stake in 2016. So it was in 2016. So they're planning to essentially purchase the rest of the company with the profits of the UFC. And like I said before, I do think that the UFC is going to be massive. And I think that's, if you look at during the pandemic, what they have been able to do is absolutely insane. I think it's going to pay dividends in the future. The UFC was the first major American sport to resume live events in 2020. And another move that has caught attention, Tesla Chief Executive Officer Elon Musk is joining the Endeavor board. So Elon Musk is going to be on the board of Endeavor. His name carries a lot of weight with retail investors, said Matt Kennedy, senior IPO market strategist at Renaissance Capital, a provider of IPO ETFs and institutional research. Retail investors have contributed to more than 628% rise in Tesla shares over the past year, and accompanying mania for all EV companies and their suppliers. So having Elon on the board, number one, it's great. If you guys don't know what board members do, we will make a video on that. But it's just a good name to have attached to your IPO, to be quite honest. Let's see, a dispute with Writers Guild of America that acted as an overhang last time Endeavor attempted to go public has been resolved. The company's financials look shaky in the pandemic, but the net loss widened to $625 million in 2020 from $530 million in 2019, and the prospectus shows. So we will go over the actual prospectus when I do this deep dive video on EDR. If you don't know what a prospectus is, essentially it's a document that they are forced to create during the SEC filing, basically stating everything about the company, how the company makes money, where the company spends their money. Literally anything about the company has to go into the prospectus. Let's see. And if you own a business, which I hope some of you do, if you own a business, you should always have a prospectus for your company. Endeavor share will start trading on the U.S. Stock Exchange Thursday under EDR. We already talked about that. EDR is a company with high complex accounting. Endeavor's last prospectus seeks to make a sprawling financial report more transparent by breaking the business down into three major segments: owned sports properties, events, experiences and rights, and representation. As it did in 2019, the company presents that structure as one of its designed to help with William Morris IMG take advantage of their opportunities in increasingly direct consumer world. So like we talked about before, basically they had to break it down into those three main pillars for tax reasons, and also because from a financial and accounting standpoint, it has to be an absolute nightmare. The company's accounting remains highly complex and includes many discontinued operations, write-offs, depreciation from owned franchises, and revalued assets. The company has more than 6,000 employees in 28 countries. It also has huge upfront costs in acquiring the rights to content that may end up not resonating with customers whose tastes change with the time. The company says that it brings that into all of its risk factors. For example, December 31st, the company committed to spending $2.2 billion in guaranteed payments for media, events, or other representation rights and similar expenses, regardless of their ability to take profits. Let's see. Finally, the company is planning an internal reorganization ahead of the deal of a series of transactions that will continue following on the chart below. So if you look at the chart below, essentially you have UFC parent company, Endeavor operating subsidiaries, Endeavor operating company, which is the LLC, and this is kind of how they have everything set up, which I do agree is insanely confusing. Endeavor's big listed asset is $4 billion in goodwill. All right, I don't want to make a whole video on goodwill, but let's talk about this. Goodwill is garbage, in my opinion. Goodwill, if you're looking at a balance sheet, there's a huge part within the assets category of a balance sheet, which we'll talk about this in another video. It's called goodwill. Goodwill is essentially, the company can make up any number. The company can say that the brand is worth blank. So Disney in the goodwill section could say, hey, we're a household brand. Company's been around for an extremely long time. Goodwill brand, the brand Disney, the name Disney is worth about $20 billion. They could say that if they want. And so for me, goodwill, I hate that. It's really just what the company thinks that the brand is worth. So yeah, the one of the biggest assets in their financial statement, which we'll go over in the deep dive, is goodwill, which I don't really like that. It kind of fluffs everything. Endeavor's debt has grown since the last time the company tried to go public. We already spoke about that, and the losses from 2019 to 2020 growing. Shareholders will have very little to say in running the company. That's basically any company. As a shareholder, you will always have your time to vote if you want, but at the end of the day, it's really not that big of a deal. Endeavor says that it does embrace its diversity, but it's not quite there. As did last time around, Endeavor says it remains committed to diversification, inclusion, and equality across all their platforms, content, clients, and employees. Yet it has just one woman in its C-suite and single female independent director. You take that for what it's worth. Kerry Chandler is the company's chief human resources officer. While the board of directors includes Fawn Weaver, that's not a huge deal to me. I do have to do more research into the EVPs and who runs the executive, who the executives really are, as opposed to like Ari Emanuel. But overall, I think that this is a company that you should keep on your radar. The stock did tap out at 32 bucks and it's pulling back right now. I do plan, like I said, to do that long-term deep dive on Endeavor, but I do think it's a company to keep on your radar. And if it pulls back down to $26, I will be purchasing this company. Guys, thank you for all the support. Hit the like button. If you want to get access to every single trade, investment, and position that I take in my portfolio, you can gain access to that for $10 your first month. Use the code Academy90. You also get access to our live stream every single morning. I go over what I'm trading, why I'm trading it, what investments I'm taking, what I'm doing with my portfolio. You also get access to our 60-hour course library with over 60 hours of modules teaching you everything that I've learned in the past 7 years, as well as our private Discord. Thank you guys for all the support. Hit the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.